Music education in rural America was practically non-existent during the first half of the 20th century. Technological advancements as well as creative thinking helped bring small towns out of the dark ages and into a brighter future for music education in the United States. The only music education available in a country town in around the 1930s and 1940s was singing schools. These were organized meetings encouraged by the church and led by music teachers who would come from larger cities to these small towns to teach the community music fundamentals. The singing school movement in America was brought on by ministers alarmed at the poor quality of singing among their congregation. The movement began in New England around 1720 and became popular across all of America in both large and small towns. But as the larger towns began to industrialize and music education moved into the public school curricula, singing schools became ancient history. In these isolated rural towns with little to do, it was easy for singing schools to stay alive for as long as they did. Many of these small towns only offered singing schools in the summer and for only 1 to 2 weeks. This 1 to 2 week period was the most music education a small town would see in this era. My grandmother Christine Duggar's testimony on her lack of music education in the 1930s and 1940s rural America further supports this research.
Born in Hortense, Texas, Polk County, in 1927. So as of this date, I'm about 84 and 1/2 years old. The singing lessons usually took place before church. We usually had a revival every summer. And sometimes we had 2 or 3 revivals, but then we might have 2 singing lessons. And after the singing lessons were through, well, then the preacher would come and he would preach a sermon and try to get people to accept Jesus Christ as their Savior and be baptized. So a great number of the people in the community would come to church, and especially the young girls and young boys, because it was a chance for them to get together and make eyes at each other. The only kind of music we had in school when I was at Camp Ruby or Livingston, either one, was if we had a Christmas program, and if we had a play, we'd put on a play, and then there might be a song in the play, and we would sing the song that was in the play. So that was really all the music that we had in school. No music was taught at all in school.
The remoteness of rural towns like Camp Ruby was the biggest obstacle music education faced. The roads were bad, the transportation was horrible, and the communities were too poor to afford to do anything about it. Many students living in the country would have to commute, and unable to afford a car, would ride the bus 20 to 40 miles on dirt roads from their houses to a high school in a less rural town. The high schools would offer band programs, but they were inaccessible to the students in the country because of before and after school rehearsals they wouldn't be able to make because of transportation, and the instruments they would not be able to purchase due to the expense.
I went to school at Camp Ruby. We moved to this little place when I was in the 4th grade. So I went to school in the community of Camp Ruby until I was a junior in high school. And when I became a junior, we had to ride the bus to Livingston, which was the largest town in the county. And we caught the bus at the commissary. We had a commissary there, which was like a big grocery store. They sold dry goods and they sold clothes. And we would meet at the commissary, and the bus driver would pick us up. It was not not air conditioned. And the road was about, we had to ride the bus about 20 miles, and we stopped all along the way to pick up different children on the highway on the way to Livingston. And sometimes we had a hill that was very muddy. And if it rained, we had to all get out and push the bus up the hill. Oh, that was so exciting. We loved it. And of course, we had got very dirty. And so we got school late that day. So we missed part of that school day, which was exciting also. But this happened every time we had a rain, because we did not have asphalt or concrete highways. We just had dirt roads. And
The radio helped, to some degree, by bringing free music into homes across America. The radio gave children new perspectives on what life was like outside dusty little towns in the middle of nowhere. Most of that different outlook came in the form of music, whether it was jazz, country, or symphony music. According to my grandmother, the folks of Camp Ruby mainly looked forward to the weekend broadcast of the Grand Ole Opry, which turns 85 next year. Educators attempted to spread music education through this new medium. Marguerite Hood was one of the first music educators to attempt to reach the unreachable via the radio. In the late 1930s, Marguerite Hood took to the airwaves in Montana, spreading her knowledge of music. She presented entire lesson plans to hundreds of kids and adults in rural areas across the Big Sky state. Hood's connection to the rural, isolated Montana towns is owed to her own experience of being born and raised in Drayton, a small town in North Dakota. Shelley Cooper, a general music education specialist and professor at the University of Arizona, wrote an article recognizing Marguerite Hood as a strong leader in music education in the 1930s. Cooper communicates in her article that radio broadcasts could reach students in isolated areas and serve as cost-effective measures for struggling schools with small budgets during the years of the Great Depression. Cooper goes on to say, she, meaning Hood, recognized the necessity of using contemporary resources in music education, a need that continues today in order for teachers to meet children's music learning needs. Hood also acknowledged the need for music educators to adapt their teaching environments to reach individual learners. Most music educators will agree that we need to adapt our teaching customs by any means necessary to reach students in various cultural contexts, like Marguerite's utilization of the radio broadcasting. Marguerite Hood's radio broadcasts may have only reached the rural towns of Montana, but it was a step in the right direction. In the 50s, entire states began to latch on to her methods and set up curricula that were dispersed statewide. Television is another way technology helped for musical exposure and education in small towns across the United States. Many critics have dubbed the 1950s as the golden age of television. Americans were buying 100,000 sets every week, and as a result, the cost went down and those less fortunate could afford a television of their own. Television meant that the students without access to the metropolitan area could experience seeing musicals, operas, symphony, orchestras, solo performers, and much more. What students in urbanized cities had live access to for years was now stretching all the way into the country and into the homes of rural American students. In the 1970s, we see the distribution of the first consumer computers, becoming more affordable later in the 1980s. In the 1990s, internet became a must for home computers, and the internet only exploded from there. Today, music educators can connect with the world like never before. They can easily download a recording of music for their classes to listen to, or pull up a video on YouTube of performances for their classes to listen, observe, or analyze. Teachers can use the internet to become better educated and better educators. Internet has become a valuable tool in the education of towns both large and small, but I believe it is the rural towns that benefit the most. With communication and information now at their fingertips, music education in these towns continues to flourish. Despite the technological advances in music education, rural communities still lag behind. Music education has improved, but the quality is still inferior to the education given to students in the big city. It becomes an issue of funding a top quality music program where funds are nowhere to be found. Christopher Lee Arredondo, a student at Stephen F. Austin University, was born and raised in Livingston, Texas. He says this: "Coming from a high school in a small town, one major hindrance was that our competition level wasn't as challenging as those from a high school from a larger city. When being exposed to all the great musicians at a university, the difference becomes very evident. I think if more funds were available to a smaller school, like the resources available at a larger school, then we may be better prepared with a stronger background in music when it comes to auditions and placements at a university. A lack of a strong tax base in small towns leaves little money to support the arts, which includes music." There's still more to be done in order for the many small town music education programs to reach a level equal to music education offered in more urbanized areas. But thanks to the growth in technology over the years, music education in rural America has come a long way